Well, greetings and welcome to CD 605 Gospel Catechesis, Transformative Discipleship. And if you're wondering about that title, well, I'm here to kind of talk about that. My name is Dr. Dean Blevins, and I'll be your professor during the semester. And I wanted to take a little bit of time right up front, one, so that you could both see and hear me, so you have a kind of face and voice behind a lot of hypertext that will occur during the semester. Though the hypertext you might prefer instead of the face and the voice, who knows, before it's all said and done. But mainly, this brief introduction is really to kind of explain the course, a little bit of the processes that are going on inside the class itself on Canvas, and just to encourage you as we go forward during the semester. Thinking about this term, gospel catechesis, transformative discipleship, probably for many of you, as you enter into this class, you may have encountered material like this, either officially in undergraduate work or somewhere else as a part of your ministry journey, through sort of more traditional categories of, yes, discipleship, or you might have even heard the phrase Christian education, which many people associate with Sunday school, or what we might call a schooling paradigm connected to sort of formal education. And to some degree, this course fits within that trajectory of either discipleship broadly understood, such as through a board of discipleship initiatives, or through Christian education proper. But we're beginning in a slightly different place by drawing from this language of catechesis, gospel catechesis, in the way in which Asbury believes that by taking this approach, we move into not just sort of a maintenance model of discipleship, but into a truly transformative approach. That means that we're kind of beginning with some assumptions that I just wanted you to be aware of up front. To begin with, we recognize that the church is facing some really interesting challenges in our current era. We know that a lot of sort of resources around the church over the years, starting in the late 20th century and right into our current century, those props that the church could lean into in the community around itself have sort of disappeared over time, and the church is up against some fresh and different challenges than it ever has before. And that the world many people live in is radically different, perhaps, than other generations. From the standpoint of at least its plurality and through the kinds of forces, if you will, social forces that are at work in our world today and how we're shaped and formed by them. What Asbury's decided to do is to say, yes, we do want to provide discipleship, but we think there are resources from within the life of the church and the history of the church, even going all the way back to, well, New Testament times and early church era, as well as the Reformation, and saying, how is it that we actually provide a very solid beginning and preparing people as they enter into the Christian faith, and then think about how we continue to work and shape them and form them as they live out their lives in the midst of a very pluralistic and powerful society that they participate in alongside their participation in the church. This idea of catechesis may harken back for some of you to the concept of catechism, and we really will talk about catechisms before it's over with, which are kind of more of a kind of bookish memorization. Maybe you had sort of an introduction to the Christian faith as a child, or maybe in youth group, and that was called a catechism at that point. But catechesis is not just content, it's also process. And one of the biggest definitions is really to understand catechesis as the pastoral formation in and through the life of the church that shapes every Christian believer as they live in the world that they participate in. And a lot of this class is really to try to provide that large approach of how is it that I, as a minister, sort of pastorally marshal all the resources that are available to provide both a vision of the Christian life and then orient and arrange the resources in the life of the church toward that vision, if you will. Now, what that means as the class unfolds is we'll probably first start by just kind of pausing to think about the world we live in today and the way it does shape and form us. We will talk about how we are challenged both intellectually, but also, quite frankly, if you think about head as intellect, heart as our affect, and hands as our behavior, that a lot of the forces that really shape us are not merely speaking to our intellect, but many times are shaping our behaviors and yes, even shaping the very desires or the loves that we have and how they're understood in the world around us. And so we'll start there just to kind of recognize the challenges that we face today. We do believe that the church can respond to that, and we'll spend some time even talking about what do we mean by the church and its role and response before we enter into this really intriguing approach of bringing the very resources together that we can then use to guide people as they live into the fullness of what the Christian faith has to provide. There are going to be a couple of surprises. I'll go ahead and let you know about that. One thing is that we are going to go back and revisit the whole role of baptism. And we will spend some time reading and thinking about that, particularly not merely as what is, I'll say later in another video, not so much a landing zone, am I now saved or not, but as a launching pad, is understanding baptism as one way of understanding the fullness of the Christian life and how baptism, particularly in the early church, was really designed to communicate this broad theological vision of what the Christian life might offer, and then how we might live into that. We will spend time looking at attempts at catechesis historically before we sort of turn to local congregations and ask then, how do we do that in our world today? Not necessarily by hitting Control, Alt, Delete and eliminating everything that's going on in a church, but perhaps moving into a church and thinking strategically how we marshal the resources, some of them already there and very powerful to help us, others perhaps more diminished and needing nurture and help. But how do we marshal those in such a way that people from the very beginning of their Christian journey and then throughout their journey are being pastorally shaped and formed into the fullness of what discipleship might be, so that they're truly moving into what we would call a transforming and transformative discipleship as a part of this journey. And we do believe that catechesis is a way to unpack that. I will go ahead and say for some of you, this content starting out will feel different, and just ask for patience with that. It's really, I think, a slightly different kind of theological vision that will guide us in this conversation. For some of you, you'll probably want to translate that's automatically in the things you're thinking that are going on in your congregation already. And actually, we actually start first with your own life before we do that, just because we know that many times how we have been shaped and formed, both if you want to think about it in the world in general as well as in the life of the church, those influence our ordinary and customary ways of thinking how discipleship should occur. And so we want us to kind of be reflective first before we move into responding in the light of the church. Now, a couple of very practical things, and then we'll end this presentation. First, because this is a major ministry class at Asbury, it comes with normally a very large enrollment, and I'm assuming that's going to be the case even as I present this video. And so you may find yourself in a class of 30 to 40 students, but find yourself in a section that's only, say, 15 to 20 students. The reason for that is during online engagement, which is our primary model in this course in Canvas, we wanted to have the class at least small enough so that you're not overwhelmed by the amount of reading and particularly responses that you're doing. As a matter of fact, one thing I will go ahead and say is that many times you'll be reading, and I will not ask you to summarize everything you've read for that week, but I'm asking you to interact with, think about, engage the things that were most important to you in your reading, and you put that down. And then what I'm trusting is through the range of the interactions with your fellow classmates as they respond to what you're writing and as you respond to them and you're interacting together, that you get the sense of the whole of what that material was trying to communicate to begin with. but we're relying on everyone, not only in their reporting of the information, though you do need to document where you're getting the information when you post it, but also in their responding to it and interacting with that content and talking about its implications, that we actually get a bigger picture than even writing book reports will do. And so there is a process, and we wanted the classes to be at least somewhat intimate, or at least somewhere between 20 or below, so that your interactions could be, you don't have to respond to everyone, but the 2 to 3 or 4 interactions you do could be substantive. And then when you read through those, it's not overwhelming. Online, a class of 40, it's pretty easy just to lose classmates in that kind of online environment. And so the sections are really designed to help you be a little more intentional by developing more of a sense of a class as a result of that. The other thing we'll be doing toward the end of the semester, the 2 or 3 assignments up early really are more individual, either in your own life or how you see your own church or ministry context. And so you need to be thinking not merely about your life, but also a given church or a given ministry as you think about some of these shorter assignments. They're really designed to connect your understanding of the reading with your own personal life or your context. But the major assignment for the class, we are actually going to be doing in small groups. That means that the groups will probably not be put together until around week 5 or 6, once we get a better sense of the flow of how the class is going. But at that point, you will gather as a small group to create a project that is designed around catechesis that may actually serve one primary ministry context, one given congregation or church, though you will bring your collective understanding and wisdom in responding to that. That is something for you to be thinking about early, though. Frankly, until you get formed into a small group, which church will be chosen and how the material might work to respond to that given congregation will probably not make any sense until you actually get to the small group endeavor. Now, I do promise that probably in working together as a smaller group, that there will be aspects of that project that you could apply even into your own personal congregation and context. But this helps to reduce the burden of everyone trying to do every component, though one person will probably end up being probably the best guide, if you will, to understand that ministry context. But it doesn't hurt, even for that pastor, if they're talking about a church even if they've been in 20 years, to hear questions from colleagues in the small group that raise sort of fresh perspectives on how you're doing ministry. Well, I hope this helps. So again, big picture, we're really talking about pastoral formation in a way that is creating, if you will, a kind of alternative culture that includes, yes, content, head, does include practices, hands, but really is designed to shape desires, the heart, into following who God is and what God's will is for each and every person's lives in and through their participation within the life of the church. We'll do that both in discussing the content in asynchronous Canvas-based online instruction, reading and interaction, and then in small group efforts as well. If you have questions, don't be shy. There's normally a place in Canvas where you can actually post them so everyone can see those questions. And will try to be attentive to replying to them. If you need to, you can just contact me directly by email. And if necessary, we could even work out a time for a conversation by phone, okay? Or by Zoom. Well, you do have my prayers, and I hope it will be a great semester as we all sort of move into this journey of gospel catechesis with the vision of creating, if you will, approaches, models, a vision for transformative discipleship as we leave this class at the end of the semester. My prayers to each and every one, and we will see you online. God bless.